Awesome. So thanks everyone for coming out on such a rainy night in August. Please welcome our guest tonight, Mark Klebanoff from GestureLogic. So Mark's a electrical engineering graduate from Carleton who during his fourth year research project came up with the technology that would end up becoming Leo Helps, the first product behind GestureLogic. And they just had an amazing Indiegogo campaign where they more than doubled their goal, their crowdfunding goal. And so tonight, in the dark, so tonight we're going to learn what it takes to start a hardware startup, what it takes to kind of go through one of those crowdfunding campaigns, and a whole bunch of more interesting things. So let's get started.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming out, Mark.
Thank you, Franco.
So just to begin with, how about you just let us know a little bit more about your background, where you're from.
Okay, sure. Well, I want to first of all thank you and Startup Grind, and thank you for having me. I feel honored. There's some really good people on the roster before and after me, so I feel privileged to be here, that's for sure. Where am I from?
Yeah, originally,
Where am I from originally? So that's a complicated story. It's got a two-part answer. I was born in Russia. I lived there for only 2 years though, and then I moved and immigrated to Israel along with my family. And then in 1999, when I was 11, I came to Canada. So that's sort of how my trajectory in life went. And then I enrolled in Carleton in electrical engineering. I went to high school here in Ottawa and middle school as well. And then I enrolled in electrical engineering at Carleton. And then I started a master's, but dropped out to do GestureLogic and Leo Helps. So. Awesome. Leo, actually. Leo Helps is the handle. The handle, yeah.
So what was your family life like? Like, was some of your relatives kind of entrepreneurial, or what was that like growing up?
So my family life, I mean, going through 2 immigrations was tough. So it wasn't easy. I mean, there were times where there was a little bit of pseudo poverty. Times when you lose friends because you move and then you have to restart life. But then we ended up in Canada, and now, thank God, it's a lot better and living a normal life. In terms of entrepreneurialism, there isn't any direct entrepreneurship in my family, but my mom is a real estate agent, so there's a little bit of an entrepreneurial mentality in the business that is sort of your own. It's an independent business, right? You don't work for anybody. And my dad is working as a consultant now, but used to work at several small companies. Also has a PhD in material science and has got a scientific background. And he has had a few ideas that haven't materialized yet, but hopefully one day they will. So there's definitely a little bit of entrepreneurial influence from my family. In terms of distant relatives, I mean, unfortunately, I haven't had much contact with them over the later stages of my life because they're not in the country, so I can't speak to that. But
okay, there you go. Yeah. And so you studied. You're here in Ottawa. You studied at the University of Carleton, right. Electrical engineering, and then you started a master's. So how was that process? Like, where did the passion for entrepreneurship come from as you were in that kind of academic background?
So I think passion from entrepreneurship came a lot from my childhood in Israel. I'm sure you guys know of the situation there in that area of the world. And the people there are tough, resilient, and they really embrace innovation, and they really embrace persevering in spite of being in a tough situation. And so a lot of that character has been instilled into me. While I was in, I finished my bachelor's and I thought I wanted to go into academia, but then I stumbled upon a very great idea and it was the right timing, and I felt like, I can always come back to do my master's, but the timing was perfect, and there's always, time to do education is always a good time. There's never really a bad time. So, but this had good timing, so I decided I would take up the challenge, and it's often, entrepreneurship and academia is often the same. There's a lot of crossover because you're independent when you're doing an academic degree, and you also have to persevere, and a lot of times you're on your own, and you have to self-direct your research. And the same thing in entrepreneurship. You're independent. You have to self-direct your path, and so that's how it happened.
Perfect. Well, that's a pretty good segue. So how about you tell us a little bit about, you know, the technology behind Leo, and how you came up with that,
Yeah, so
and what it does, I guess.
yeah, what it does. The way it started was I did a fourth-year project with one of my co-founders. He should be in the room, but I guess he's not here yet. He was the university prof at Carleton, and I did a fourth-year project. Every fourth-year engineer has to do what they call a capstone project, and so I did mine with Leonard, and it was on using muscle activity to either control technology or prosthetics or measure your physiological performance. And so I developed a prototype that was able to measure muscle activity from your body. And so that was sort of the first prototype that sort of formed the foundation of this technology. And then I went on to my master's, and that sort of development stopped. And then the company came out. Maybe some of you are familiar with it, called Talmud Labs. That they raised $1 million, sold I don't know how many millions in a few days, and they used basically the same base technology, but they used it for controlling other technology. So it was a tool to interface between your body and computers. And it was based on the same tech that I developed a year before in my bachelor's. And so Len and I decided, well, if these guys found a solution that matched that this technology was able to provide, it has many other uses. Maybe we can use this technology for a different purpose. And we came with the idea that we can use muscle activity to monitor physiological performance. And then we started the company. We started GestureLogic. At first, it was him and I, and then we brought on more people. We brought on Michael to do some of our finance stuff, and then we brought on Michelle, the designer, and then the team grew from there.
Awesome. So you were in the middle of, or sorry, at the early stages of a master's degree, and Thelmic Lab, they're based in Waterloo, they came out with the Mio.
That's right, the Mio, exactly.
The Mio, Mio, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called either.
And so basically at that point in time, that's what you were talking
that
about
was
earlier.
The spark,
that was the timing, that was the spark, that it was kind of now, as you said, you can always go back to education, but there might not be another opportunity to kind of do that. So, how did the team meet? It was obviously just you and a student at first, but then how did you guys surround yourself with other people, you know, based at Carleton, a product that had just come out of an academic kind of world? How did you guys pull in the right kind of people to help you found GestureLogic and go to the next step?
Yeah, I mean that's an important piece when you kind of transition from research to real company. A lot of it was organic. So like, it was just Len and I at first. We were working on this, and it was strictly product development. And we realized, okay, well, we can't go on like this forever. We have to pay ourselves, so we need some grants. So you find somebody to help you with grants. And you realize, okay, well, you need to manage the books, so you find somebody to manage your books. And then you realize, well, we have this ugly prototype, and we have no way of showing what the final prototype will look like. So you go and find a designer. And so we built the team out like that. Most of it for now has been out of Carleton, which is fortunate for us. And we've been using a lot of Carleton's labs, but now we're moving to a new space actually. But a lot of it was organic, and a lot of it is people are there at the right place at the right time. The good thing about Carleton is that it's becoming more and more entrepreneurial, so a lot of people are starting to understand the startup mentality, and that you don't need an 80K salary. If you can get a 40K salary and you have an upside with equity, then that's worth the time and investment into a 12-hour, 14-hour workday. So, so that helped. So that's how it.
So it just kind of came together.
It organically grew, and as we became more known and the Go-Go campaign started, or we launched our webpage or whatever, that was sort of a catalyst for people saying, this is a cool product, I want to work here. Mm-hmm. So we got a lot of people applying without even reaching out to them.
Awesome. So now that you bring up the product, so I mean, it sounds like, so it came out of research, you knew you had something there, but how did you validate the product with an actual market? Because I mean, you said you had an ugly prototype before the Indiegogo campaign came along.
How did you know that? Better looking one here.
How did you know that you actually had something that that you could that actually met a demand and that you could sell?
Yeah. So let me clarify before I answer that what Leo actually is, because I think we've missed. I probably didn't say clearly what it is. But Leo is a wearable tech product. It's a compression band that goes on your leg, measures your quadriceps and your hamstrings, and it analyzes things. It analyzes your muscle output, and from that you can get things like lactic acid, fatigue, whether you're utilizing a muscle or not. You can even detect injuries. You can detect hydration levels. And there's a few other things that I'm not remembering right now. But form, and you can correct it. And all this is done in real time. It speaks to your mobile device. And the unique part about it is that it's not just a calorie counter that you're used to in your Fitbit or your Fuel Band. Those things are not even accurate. If you go in and you wash dishes, you burn more calories than when you lift a weight. So
it's a good workout. So
you throw it down a flight of stairs, it thinks you've walked 10 miles. But so that's the point of this, is that it's actually measuring your body, and it's analyzing your physiological performance. And then because we're focusing on the legs right now, I mean, eventually it could be on any part of the body, the sensors. But we're focusing, we're trying to do an MVP, the minimum viable product, and it's on the leg. And it's going to be targeted towards cyclists and runners. Mm-hmm. So now I can answer your question. Sure. How did we validate that cyclists and runners are actually in need of this product? We actually started with weightlifters. Okay. And we thought, how do you know what is the perfect weight and the optimal amount of sets and reps that you should do in the gym? That's a common problem every weightlifter faces, I think. Usually people will say 80% of my max, and most people don't even know what their max is. And so this will actually tell you, if you want to target your chest, for example, this technology will be able to tell you what is the optimum weight and the optimum amount of sets and reps that you should do, because it's actually measuring your muscle activity. That's okay, you can even answer it. But the problem with weightlifters, and that's what we found out when we started doing customer discovery, which I think if anybody's doing a startup, that's an important piece of your startup, is that weightlifters are usually grungy people. They don't have that much money. They're usually younger. They're not older. And they don't really believe in they're all about pushing harder, but not working out smarter. And it's a hard mentality to change. And it might change over time, but this wasn't the right time for it. And it's also a smaller market. So we decided, well, what's a better market where we can show a value proposition much clearer and much easier, and there isn't as much education that's required. By the way, I was generalizing weightlifters. I'm sure there are. Our CEO is actually a weightlifter, not a cyclist or a runner. So we pivoted towards cyclists and runners, and what we realized their problems were that all the equipment that they use, it's fragmented. So they use a heart rate monitor, they use a cadence meter, they use a power meter, they use a phone, they use a GPS, they have a watch, right? All these things have different functions, and they all cost a lot of money. Like a power meter is $1,500, cadence meter is $100, a heart rate monitor is $300. So we realized, why don't we just consolidate all those things into one device? And so that's what we did, and we consolidated a power meter, a heart rate monitor, and a cadence meter, and a GPS unit, and a calorie counter, all into one device. And on top of that, cyclists and runners go for lactic acid tests, the high-end ones at least, and they pay $200 to finger prick themselves and cause a lot of pain, and go to a max effort ride and almost puke in the bucket, and then they get their lactic acid profile, and then they buy a power meter to correlate that power meter to their lactic acid profile. So we just said, well, if you're using this technology called EMG, I've never actually mentioned the fundamental science, but it's called EMG, electromyography. If you can actually detect lactic acid levels non-invasively, not as accurate as blood tests, but within 5% to 10% accuracy. So we decided that we offer that as a feature, and that is a big value proposition for a cyclist. And then we also decided that we're going to create a personified sort of actionable feedback type of platform, not just raw numbers like other cycling products do right now. They give you your power is 100 watts. Well, what does that mean? So we, instead of taking this raw data and giving you numbers, we actually give you recommendations. So you're not pulling enough with your hamstrings, or your lactic acid levels are too high, slow down, or you're about to cramp up, get off your bike and stretch, right? So those are things that no other wearable products do. So we found out all this through a rigorous process of customer discovery, and you're never done customer discovery because you're always learning about your customer as you go. But there are standard books that describe how to do this, and we sort of followed the method, and we arrived at this solution. Plus, investors also pulled us towards the cycling and running market. And when an investor tells you, "I'll give you $100 grand for making a product for cycling and running," you don't say no.
So okay, so maybe let's touch on a bit more of that kind of early stage. So as you guys are doing this customer discovery and investors are saying, hey, you should go to this market.
Yep.
How did you guys begin that? Finding those investors. How did you begin that family and friends round that helped you pay yourselves and start attracting other people, all from Carleton?
Right. So first of all, when an investor tells you that your business model was wrong, the first thing in your head you think is you're full of shit. But then you realize that they're right. I mean, the ones that are good. You realize that they're right, and then you start spinning your wheels and you start thinking about why they're right, and you look deep inside yourself and you look into your business model and you look at how you probably failed at the business model that you presented because they found such a clear gaping hole in your business model, right? So we started that. We started with the fitness. We started with the weightlifting market, and we pitched to angel investors before we even had a product or before we even had a campaign and before we even raised the friends and family round. So we tried to sort of hop over the friends and family round and go straight to angels, and we realized how bad that was, and then we realized we were trying to get ahead of ourselves without covering some of the basics, and then so we were forced to start a friends and family round. And during our friends and family round, we spun our wheels a lot and did this customer discovery process. And there's very little development that happened there, but it was very valuable because it helped us validate the market. And when we figured out our market, then raising money even from friends and family was easier. And I mean, eventually transitioned to an angel round, which is what we're closing now, a seed round. But yeah, so, and friends and family is very important, because if you can't convince your friends and family, then you can't convince an angel investor. And also the stakes are much lower. It is a lot higher risk, but at least with your friends and family, usually asking them if they have money for 5K is not too bad. Our CEO brought in a bunch of people, I brought in a bunch of people, Michael brought in a bunch of people, and we were able to collect around 300K, and that was enough to last for, we were really frugal, but it was enough to last for 3 to 4 months of development. I think we're 5 maybe?
We're still going.
We're still going, yeah, I guess we're still going. A lot of it was, a lot of our services were leveraged on convertible notes. By the way, if anybody's ever starting a friends and family round, don't try to do a valuation, always do a convertible note round, because there's no way to value a business when you have no sales, when you have no product, and you have no licensing deals, no partnerships, no nothing, no metrics, no financial metrics to value a business. So just do a convertible notes round, which is what we did. So you take on debt, which will eventually convert once you raise the next round of financing, which is an equity round usually.
Great tip, yeah.
Yeah.
And so how did you guys go about starting to get that angel round? The next step, was that all from Ottawa, or did you go outside the city? Where did you look, and who did you talk to, if you're allowed to share some of that stuff? Or,
yeah,
or
for sure. I mean, in terms of talent and financing, Ottawa is not enough. For any business that wants to be massively scalable, and especially one that is deeply rooted in science and technology innovation, Ottawa does not have enough money or talent to support it. I wish I could say it differently, but it doesn't. I mean, if you look at Shopify, all their investment came from outside of Ottawa. There's not a single VC firm that invested in Shopify. There aren't any VC firms in Ottawa, except for I think there are some early stage funds now. Mistral is one of them, a pretty good fund actually. So you have to go outside of Ottawa. So we started with a friends and family round, and even that one was outside of Ottawa. A lot of it was outside of Ottawa. And then the key is to talk to some angels who think big. And the typical areas are like Boston, California, New York kind of area. And if you can find that lead angel investor from those areas, it'll make raising financing from angel groups in Ontario, which will spin you in circles and torture you, much easier. Because then you have an angel, lead angel from the valley who is willing to take on the brunt of the risk, and you make everybody around the table a lot more comfortable. So, and they think big too. I mean, the mentality in California, and Boston, and New York, and some other areas around the world is very different than it is here, and it's refreshing, which is very important, I think, for a startup in a city where there isn't a lot of financial activities going on. So it's certainly possible to have a startup here, and we're staying here for the long haul, but you have to go outside. And same thing with talent. You have to go to Waterloo, you have to go to U of T, you have to go to all those other universities that offer a different perspective than Carleton Waterloo does. And that's exactly what we're doing now.
Cool. And so talking about going outside or on that subject, so you guys, you mentioned it a little bit before, and maybe you guys were kind of paying attention, but when you described Leo, it's actually 3 pieces, or 4 pieces, I guess. So you got the fabric band,
That's
you've
right.
got the actual hardware, the software that it runs, and then the cloud integration.
That's
so
right.
how did you guys actually find all the technology, all the producers? Where's it being produced? How did you go to those external markets to help
Right.
put this prototype and now the crowdfunded product together?
Yeah. So I mean, you have to do the prototyping in house because you have to understand what you're trying to build first before you go to suppliers. Because if you don't give them a clear, this is what I want, these are the milestones, you're not gonna get the right results. So, we prototyped. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's textiles, hardware, the embedded software. There's the algorithm component, which is a research sort of field, and then there's the software on your mobile device, and then there's the cloud.
So it's like working on 5 startups.
It's like working on 5, and I'm in charge of product, so I deal with all those areas, and it's really tough to juggle all of them. But so we kept algorithms in house. You have to keep those in house because nobody knows. You have to hire a very specialized skill set, and there aren't really anybody that does machine intelligence. Any consulting places that do machine intelligence. So that's in house. Hardware is the design at least is in house. And textiles we started prototyping it in house as well. Same thing with the software, with the software on the phone and the embedded software. And the cloud you can probably outsource, but we haven't gotten to that stage yet. We're sort of focusing on the product first, and then we're going to go to the cloud. In terms of, all the design is done in-house, but we're obviously outsourcing manufacturing. So the textiles, we found a supplier that's doing graduated compression apparel in Florida. So you have to know what you want. Like we wanted to go with a compression knitwear. We didn't want to make this prototype from multiple pieces. We wanted it all to be knitted at the same time. So we went to a place that was specialized in knitting and also knew how to make compressive clothing. So we went to them, and now we're striking a partnership. But first we prototyped the textiles in-house to validate that we can actually do it. And then now we're doing the technology transfer over to the supplier, and they're going to scale. So we can't scale in-house, obviously, so we have to go to suppliers to scale. Same thing with hardware. We're manufacturing the hardware using one of the big 4 PCB manufacturers in the world. We're actually striking a deal with one. I can't say who it is, but the typical ones are Celestica, Foxconn, or Flextronics, or what's the other one? Sanmina. So you go to one of those 4 to do anything over 1,000 unit volume. For the small volume runs, though, we used local PCB manufacturers called one of them is Dyka, and the other one is Camtech in Markham. So for low volume, you can do a little bit from locally, but if you want to go high volume, you have to go to the States or overseas. So, yeah.
And how's the cost? Is it cheaper when you do low volume, kind of local, or is it cheaper when you get to those massive scales?
Well, you just won't get attention for low volumes from the big players. They just won't. They won't do 25 unit runs. So you have to go to they call them like NPI houses, new product introduction. They do 25 unit runs, and then they know that you're going to go to somebody else to scale anyway. So they cover that niche in the market. So that's what we did. Is there another part of
No,
your question?
well, that's good. So you touched on something else that I want to talk about. So as the chief product officer, what's your day-to-day kind of role like? Do you spend more time on one side or the other, or where's most of your time invested now?
It's tough because there's so many stages in the business that I was involved in that I don't really have a defined. Every Monday I have a product development meeting, and I get the team on track for the weekly milestones. Every Friday I make sure that those milestones are met. Strategically, I do it at the end of Friday so that, Michelle, you're not supposed to hear this, but I do this at the end of Friday, so if they don't meet their milestones, it's an implication that they have to stay on the weekend to meet them. And then I constantly have to adjust the schedule to make sure that it's meeting the strategic goals of the business, like the milestone schedule. And there's a weekly milestone, a monthly milestone, and a quarterly milestone schedule. And I have to constantly adjust them so that it's meeting the strategic milestones, but I'm also making sure that I'm updating it and to see if the timelines have changed, or if the milestones have shifted, or if we're falling behind, or stuff like that. So I do a lot of that. Today I was at a meeting with our legal counsel to finalize the documents for the closure of our seed round. Yesterday I was being a guinea pig, and they were doing a test on me because we had a band that only fits on me. And I was doing a max effort, like basically till I puke, test on the bike, and they were all making fun of me. And we were testing whether the skin impedance has an effect on your muscle activity output. So, anyways, it's all technical, but so that it depends on the day. And a lot of my recent month has been focused on hiring. So it's really tough to scale. I now understand why people hire recruiters, because hiring 3 people, you'd think it's not even that many people. But I've spent, I don't even know, maybe 150 hours over the last 3 weeks on hiring, and it just sucks up all my time. So I got a recruitment software that's helping me out now a lot. So a lot of it is also optimizing the process. So as the company grows, you have to make sure that there's process. So hiring process. There's various different processes, like how, on the accounting side, there's a lot of process. So you have to make sure that you start worrying about efficiency. Mm-hmm. I can't be always the one that's hiring, so I have to make a hire. I have to have a hiring managers and make sure that people are taking off some of the load from me, because I can't. Yeah. So.
And so how's that adjustment? How are you making that adjustment? How are you finding that adjustment from academics to trying to design these processes, to trying to do things that you might not have done before, like balancing books? Where do you look for resources or support?
I'm going to manage my books.
Okay, that's good. But I mean, so how did that? There's obviously a huge growing process there, and a lot of the things that you just mentioned are highly technical.
Yep.
And maybe you do know all these things, but
I don't.
How do you learn them? How did you go about figuring those pieces out?
A lot of it just has to do with the desire to want to have personal growth. I learned more in a startup in a month than I've learned in 5 years in school and in doing 2 years of R&D work in various companies. So I don't know everything. I actually know everything very poorly. I know a lot, but I don't know it well. Like the books, I kept them for 2 or 3 months when we started, and then Michael took over, and he's like, "What is this?" Right? And I'm learning on the spot, but it's being resourceful. So you have to know how to learn the things that you don't know, and you have to recognize the things that you don't know. You recognize you don't know the books, so you hire a bookkeeper. You recognize you don't know how to scale manufacturing, so you find a supplier to do that for you. It's those kind of things, and the process you just develop over time. You try to. It's like pivoting business models. You look at something that works. If I have a meeting on Monday and then a meeting on Friday, and that doesn't work, then I'll have a meeting on Tuesday and have it on Wednesday or so. And you try little things every time, and you measure their success and their ROI, I guess. And you pivot all the time. So that's how you do it. And you have to have good advisors as well. So we've been fortunate. We've had good advisors. So tough problems, usually I'd go to an advisor and see how they did it in their startup. And usually there isn't one solution that fits all, because every startup is different. But yeah, cool.
And so with the Indiegogo campaign, you guys, it sounds like you have been doing a lot, all at once, especially with the 5 startups kind of in one.
Yeah.
But how did you guys, why did you guys decide to do a crowdfunding campaign? Why did you pick Indiegogo?
I wasn't involved in the decision of picking Indiegogo. It was more Michael. How did we decide to go to Indiegogo? So have we had that decision now, we probably wouldn't have done it. But 6 months ago, we were in a place where 5 months ago, we were in a place where we had a prototype, we had a product, but we were talking about it. We couldn't show anybody anything. We couldn't show anybody sales or revenue. We couldn't show anybody a final version of the product. We couldn't show a video that summarizes the innovation in a 2-minute sort of visual pitch. We couldn't show people product progression. We couldn't show a lot of things. And there wasn't a forum for people to ask questions and for us to answer them. And we didn't have paid advertising and none of that stuff. We didn't have PR, we didn't have anything. So the best way to do all this, and we didn't have a brand. We didn't have a name.
Yeah.
So the best way to do all that is to, and in a cheap way, is to start an Indiegogo campaign. Because one, it drives traffic for you, and then it also unleashes sort of the community around your startup that is very early adopterish, and that's very necessary at the early stages of a company. And so it would help. We knew it was going to help us do sales. We knew it was going to help us show traction. We knew it was going to validate the market. We knew we were going to be able to produce a video. We knew there was going to be visual content for people to see. We knew it would help us to find a brand and the name. So all those benefits came out of the Indiegogo campaign, and so that's why we embarked on that journey. Now we realize we did too much marketing, and we need to focus back on product development. And now that we're closing this round, we're refocusing our efforts, burying our heads in the sand, and refocusing our efforts on product dev. But we learned a lot of valuable lessons from Indiegogo, and we learned a lot more about our target market. We learned a lot more about the behaviors of the users that are going to buy the product. Like, for example, we learned that cyclists and runners are not our target market yet. They are our eventual target market. There's 26 million cyclists that cycle more than twice a week, and 27 million runners that run more than twice a week. So we know that that's our target market. These are serious cyclists and runners, so it's a fairly large market. It's almost 50 million people. Or even a little bit more, maybe.
I'm not in it, so -1.
Yeah, I'm not in it either. But what we did learn from Indiegogo is that those are marketing is it's like a wrapper. It's like a candy wrapper with multiple wrappers. The first wrapper is, you got to find out who your early adopters are. And we found out that it's actually tech geeks that have that have a desire to be healthy and fit, but not necessarily cyclists or runners. Certainly cyclists and runners are interested, and they want a free product, and they want to test it in their labs, or they want to correlate it with their power meter, but they're skeptics. And so until we've gotten ourselves in some of the biggest cycling and running magazines or some of the publications, and we validated the science and we have a working product, cyclists and runners won't buy it. Like, once it's in retail, then they'll buy it. But on the website, they won't. They don't have that risk tolerance that early adopters do. So that was important, because we would have never found that out without an Indiegogo campaign. We could have been selling to retail stores from day one, and no retail store was going to take the product, and never found out that really our market is digitally on e-commerce, where people would front $180 for a product that doesn't even exist yet. So that's what was amazing about that process, and I think we discovered a lot. Michael certainly discovered a lot since he ran it. But
And so you also talked about, like, obviously the need, but also finding the brand throughout the campaign. And so how did you guys come up with the brand? Why is Leo separate from GestureLogic? Is that just a structural thing, or is it a branding thing?
No, so that's actually intentional. GestureLogic is the umbrella organization. It's the corporate brand. It's not even a brand, it's the corporate entity. Mm-hmm. And GestureLogic is a company the vision of the company is to produce products that have massively scalable growth potential. Ones that are based in science and innovation, right? So not like a spoon or a plate, or something that's and that's what GestureLogic is going to be doing. Leo is just one product that we're focused on now, and so that's why the separation. So GestureLogic is a corporate brand, and there may be other product lines that will come out of it, ones that are massively scalable and have a lot of growth potential. Leo is our first venture into that, and the brand of Leo came about in it was a long process. The few things that you have to have around you when you're creating an Indiegogo campaign: you have to have a PR firm, you have to have if you don't have any branding or naming, you need to have a digital marketing agency or somebody to help you with that, because choosing a name and a brand is a very delicate thing. Unless you have somebody that has marketing experience, which we didn't, then you need a marketing agency. You do need, what else do you need around you? What else in that ecosystem, Michael? You need a video house. You do need a designer to do your graphic content and stuff like that. So once you have all those things, you've met the requirements, Michelle. You've met the requirements of what you need for Indiegogo, and so the digital marketing agency did our brand.
So you work with a lot of external things to kind of figure out what fits and what's going to appeal to people.
Exactly, and the digital marketing agency went through their standard process of finding out about the company, and then they gave us a few naming options, and we like Leo because it was personified. It came from Leonardo da Vinci, which was a really he had a unique understanding of physiology and science, and so we blend those together, and that's exactly our product. So that's why we chose Leo, and it's also the first 3 letters of our CEO's name, but that's not why we chose it. What else? That's it.
So did you guys also hire people to help you with the Indiegogo campaign, or was a lot of it done in-house? Or?
No. Other than, well, the video
was done. Video was done externally. Okay.
But all the content and the written material was done in between Michael and Michelle, our designer and our accountant turned marketing person.
Awesome. Good job. Good job. And so how did you guys, how did you go about building the actual Indiegogo campaign? Did you guys, did you have a list built up that you'd launch to? Did you do a whole bunch of press, or did you guys just put it out there and hope somebody would see it?
Michael, do you want to come up here? We had something called Leo's Inner Circle.
Okay.
So that was our list of sort of brand ambassadors that were going to go out. We pre-built it before the Indiegogo campaign. And we gave them a task of contacting 12 people each, and it was a list of 100 people, and they had to contact 12 other people and sell them bands. So that was our initial push, and this is pre-getting PR. So you have to show some sort of sales ramp up at the beginning of the campaign without PR, because you don't get PR until later. So that was our initial push. And then we had a PR firm, and you can get into trouble with PR firms, so you have to be careful. But then you need a PR firm to actually contact media outlets and do demos, and then they publish about you, and that's what drives traffic. And sales are all about conversions. So traffic versus the sale, and that's the conversion ratio, right? And so your marketing content is there and helps conversion, but if you don't have traffic, then nobody will see that marketing content in the first place. So you need to generate traffic. And so Leo's Inner Circle was the first push, and that was our own personal network, but you can only get so far with it. It's like doing door-to-door sales. It doesn't really work when you want a massively scalable business. So you have to do PR, and you have to find other ways of driving traffic. There's also the organic method, which is Facebook and Twitter, but that takes a long time to build up as well. Because we only just broke 1,000 followers recently. So at first, when you have 20 followers, your impact on every post is not very high. So a lot of it is wasted time. So yeah. So those are 3 ways: personal network, social media, which is organic, and then PR.
What's been the biggest challenge to date? I mean, I'm sure there's been a ton of them, but what overall throughout the whole process, what's been the biggest roadblock that you guys had to overcome?
The largest roadblock. There's been so many, it's hard to remember. Maybe I should look at my notes. I brought my notes.
Just a couple then?
I think the biggest roadblock was between August 2013 and December 2013, when we were pivoting, or when we were finding our market. We were going after the weightlifters, but that wasn't going anywhere for 5 months. And when you are a student that just dropped out of master's with no money, and that's a very difficult thing to do for 5 months. So that was a very difficult, I think that was one of the most difficult periods for me. And you're also struggling to find the right people to help you build the startup. And at that point, you don't have much of an appeal because people don't really see the growth yet. You have to find the right people that really see the potential despite all the bad things that are going on. So that was tough. And when we pivoted, we overcame such a big hurdle to cycling and running. We overcame such a big hurdle, and everything was just took off from there. So I think that was the biggest roadblock. And also a lot of it was focus. We were targeting weightlifters, but weightlifters do so many exercises. And there are power lifters, and then there is the average gym goer, and then there's Olympic weightlifters, and there's CrossFitters, and we just couldn't focus on a single application. We couldn't focus on a form factor. We had very little focus, and that's really tough when you have a team of 3 or 4, and having a product line you need a team of 150 to complete. So when we went to cycling and running, it was obvious that we needed it on the leg, and we only needed to monitor quadriceps and hamstrings, so that simplified the problem. The MVP became much more structured, so yeah, that was the biggest roadblock. And there's a lot of other roadblocks. There's financing, there's not being able to pay your employees, there's a constant roller coaster, and every high, there's always a corresponding low a few months later. So you get past them eventually. It's an oscillating thing. It's like it's like oil prices. It oscillates, but it generally goes up. So as long as you can persevere.
Cool. And so finding that focus helped define the MVP. It helped define kind of the next steps to follow. And so now where are you guys at? You guys have just closed the crowdfunding. You said you're closing some angels. So what's kind of the next steps for you guys?
Yeah, the big steps is closing the seed round. It's going to be a fairly large seed round. Hopefully we're closing it before the end of August. I'm not really sure what the exact close date is. Len would know. I don't know if Len is here. That's going to give us about 9 months of runway, 9 to 12 months of runway, I think.
That's good. No, that's good. That's good. That's so much.
You're up there.
It doesn't have.
You're on your own today.
Usually, if I want to know my burn rate or how
Yeah.
much I have to spend on product dev, I just turn around. Michael sits behind me, and I ask. I don't have that luxury right now. Yeah, I think 9 to 12 months of runway. So that's a long runway till our Series A, and that will get us to pre-production. So we're not scaling manufacturing yet, but that'll give us the final design, and that's what we need, because then you have 100 units that are not they're not it's not a large scale manufacturing, but it's a final product and it works the way a consumer would use it. And then you send it to a bunch of VC firms, you send it to a bunch of PR firms, and you make a big splash that way, because then you have a finished product and people see immediately the value. So that's what we want to get in April.
Okay. And the crowdfunding campaign, you guys are going to be shipping those?
So that will be shipping hopefully in April as well. That will probably be our small production run to satisfy those orders. Yeah, so the target for those is April. Might be delayed a little bit.
Awesome. And so, I mean, other than the whole wearable technology space, where do you see the kind of the hottest markets
For us?
For you guys, or like what's hot right now other than wearables? Obviously you're in wearables, but
What's hot
where
right now?
where else would you be interested in, or is it all just
The interesting part, the highest growth market right now,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people might not want to hear it, but the highest growth market that I've heard of is the marijuana market. There was a company, I think it was the one in the Hershey's factory, that
Yeah.
one of our investors that might be coming in on this round, he invested in it, and 4 months later, he got 9x return on his investment. So if you project that over a year, I don't know how many times return that is, but that's an incredible ROI.
Yeah.
We'll never get that growth rate. Wearable tech can't match that for sure. But that's one of the hottest markets. If I was to invest from a pure financial
Yeah.
perspective, that would be where I would put my money on.
Sorry, I meant more like, so do you think the actual physical hardware is kind of the next step, or do you think it's more of the whole relationship between something that's capturing information and printing it out on like your mobile phone, or
Oh, okay,
is it
in
all
that
is it all
sense-
software and cloud? Like, sorry, in that sense.
Yeah, in that sense, big data is the way.
Big data?
is where it's at, because what's happening is you're going to have a bunch of these sensors, and you're going to need a cloud system that aggregates it. And then you have to pick out the features that are important for insurance companies or advertisers who want to target towards a very particular market, and they understand. And if you have that big data and you understand people's trends every day, and their fitness trends and their health trends, then you can market to them. And insurance companies are going to really want that, because they can base insurance claims off of that. And companies want it for corporate health and wellness programs. So I think the big data play is where the industry is going. That's why Apple is doing HealthKit and Google is doing, I don't know what
Their
it's
version,
called.
yeah.
And we want to do our own big data server as well, because we're one of the only sensors that actually do a wide range of physiological monitoring beyond just heart rate. Because heart rate is useful, but there are a lot of other there's a lot of other uses that haven't been discovered yet with EMG and hydration. So we want to do that as well. Yeah. So big data is where I think the industry is heading eventually.
Do you guys plan to continue to work a lot with consumers, or do you plan to kind of move into the athletic world and work closer with major athletes, or?
So the consumer space is where the money is for us right now. The athletic world is where we build the credibility. So that's not where the money is, because teams want sponsorships, and athletes, individual athletes, like Olympic athletes, want the band for free because they're high-end athletes and they think that they can promote your company. So you don't get money from athletes. So that's where you build your credibility. But the market, your revenue stream is still coming from the consumer space, or some weekend warriors, or maybe it depends how you define consumers. Either it's you or me are consumers, or a high-end cyclist. But yeah, so that's where we're going. But the amazing part about our technology is that it didn't come out of the consumer space. It came out of the clinical space, and EMG has been around monitoring people's progression after surgery, monitoring physiological performance for very high-end athletes for years. I don't know if you guys have ever seen somebody run on a treadmill and they've got like 10 sensors attached to them. That's them measuring muscle activity. You can measure gait and imbalances and all that stuff. So that technology has been around for 30 years. All we've done is make it we made it wearable and mobile and usable in real time and not cumbersome like it was. So we can always go back, once we build the consumer space, we can always go back to rehab or post-op or rehab or clinical or research or whatever. So for all the uses that this technology has historically been known to be used, and our solution is actually better because researchers can now put it on somebody and they can get raw data in real time from remotely, and they don't have to get 100 participants to come into the lab, which is expensive and time consuming. So. So that's where we're going, and we have an orthopedic surgeon on staff that's looking into some of the more niche cases in the medical world and the post-op world of this product rather than the consumer space.
Cool. Sounds really, really interesting. So before I flip it over to the crowd, let me just ask you a few more questions to wrap it up.
Are these the personal ones?
Well, some of them are personal, but it's also kind of generic. So if there was some advice that you could give to someone who's looking to start, a hardware startup, taking on multiple aspects, kind of like you guys have, rather than just working on a single app, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Oh, it's tough. There's a lot of, there's a lot of little things like if you gotta try to fail quickly. If you're hitting, the biggest thing with us is that we circled around for a long time because we refused to fail quickly. So people were telling us, don't go after the weightlifting market, and we'd say no, well, that's what we want to do. But like after somebody's told you that 10 times, just rethink your model and pivot, right? So you have to fail quickly, and you have to learn how to fail and recognize the failure and then pivot. And I don't mean failure in the traditional sense. I mean in the business sense. A failure just means that you didn't get your business model is not right, so you have to pivot it. What else? Same thing with hiring. You hire quickly and you fire even quicker. It's a harsh thing to say, but it's very true because you have to constantly, the company has to constantly reevaluate itself, and the non-performers have to be dropped, and the ones that are excelling have to be rewarded. So that's the only way that this system works if you want to compete with California. And the other thing that I would say is, a lot of people, I've noticed this trend in Ottawa, that a lot of smart people chase bad ideas. There's no point of doing 5 things poorly. Find the right thing, wait 2 or 3 years, and land on the thing that has a lot of potential. Save up all your energy for that, and then go hard on that, and put all your energy into that. There's no point of spreading your energy across 5 things and not doing them well, unless you're a genius and you can do that. I certainly can't. I waited till the right opportunity, and still yet to see whether this opportunity is going to come to fruition. But I waited till the right opportunity, and I didn't. I had a lot of other opportunities to start my own things, but I waited till the one that was really promising in my eyes. So I think a lot of people should do that instead of hopping from idea to idea and not really finishing much, because I've seen that a lot in Ottawa. So that's my advice.
Cool.
It's kind of 3 different pieces of advice wrapped into it.
Oh, that's really solid. And kind of a goofy question, but if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Oh,
would it be waiting for the right idea?
This is a good one. Our CEO, Leonard, is a very mysterious man. He's very hard to read. If you ever sit down at a table with him, he could be saying something completely ridiculous, but with a straight face, and he can continue that for like 5 minutes, right? And you never know if he's actually joking or serious, and you really don't even know what he feels about you, whether he likes what you're doing or he doesn't like it. He has no expression, right? So I wish I could read his mind.
mind.
That way I would know. That way I would know. And then I could also tell what a girl is thinking about me at the bar. Not that I do that. I have a girlfriend. But but that would be a very good superpower.
There you go. All right, let's flip it over to you guys. I think I've chewed up enough of Mark's time. Do you guys have any questions for Mark? We'll start right here. Go ahead.
I got to, the first is where all this physiology knowledge and understanding comes from. Like you're an electrical engineer,
Yep.
but it seems like there is a lot of insight into
Physiology?
yeah, where does it come from and where does it come from and how do you stay on top of it? Like do you have some experts?
Yeah. So that's it's an interesting question actually. I've been surprised at how much physiological stuff I've learned over the last year. I actually had no interest in biology when I was going through university, and now I find this whole field fascinating. I don't actually know much about it. I think I just give off the impression that I do. I do need to know enough to be able to talk to potential customers and sports scientists and stuff like that.
Right.
But I have people on the team. We have a dual PhD in neurophysiology that does our lactic acid portion of the product. Not developing the product, but she does the basic science research behind it. And I have a orthopedic surgeon, specifically for sports injuries. So this guy knows the whole breadth of between sports science, sports medicine, operations, post-op. So those when you put those two people together in the room, you kind of are forced to learn what they're talking about because they spit jargon at you, and then you have to ask them what are they talking about. So I've picked it up, I guess, over the last year. Yeah. But you know, our startup, that sort of language floats around a lot. The training and the sports science side, it's just inherent in when talking about our product. So you have to learn, or you don't really make an effective communicator with the customers that you are selling to.
Right. My
Yeah.
second question was, what is there in terms of competition? You said there is like 30 years old technology. Like you said, those runners.
Open that door.
No, it should be that one. I don't know why somebody's in the kitchen, but it should be the kitchen door right there. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, so electromyography started in the clinical world.
Right.
It's a big set-top box with leads coming out of it, and they're medical-grade leads that sit on your muscles and they analyze your muscles, right? So those guys that make that are not our competition. They're in the clinical space. They sell to 1,000, maybe not even 1,000, 500 people a year, and that's their business. And they're not growing. They're saturated, and maybe they have an increase of 1 or 2% in their sales figures every year. But our competition really is startups that are innovating in the same space. So Montreal has 2 startups that make a shirt with integrated heart sensors. So they're not measuring muscle activity, so they're just a heart rate monitor integrated into a shirt, but they're targeting the same consumer space as us. And I don't know if you're familiar with them. It's called, one of them is OmSignal, the other one is Hexoskin. OmSignal just raised a $10 million round on a $30 million valuation, so they're about a year and a half ahead of us, maybe a year. And then there's another company in the States called Athos, and they're doing, again, a shirt and pants with integrated sensors measuring muscle activity. So very similar tech to us. They're integrating into apparel, so they have to worry about fashion issues, which we try to stay away from. And they're targeting a much more broad market, whereas we focused on cycling and running, and we seem to be penetrating that market a lot better than they are. So that's our competition. And then there's another company in Europe, but Europeans are, at least in this space, are known for not being good marketers, and they're not very well known. I'm generalizing. It's really bad. No, in this space, I mean, Polar used to be the leader in heart rate monitoring, and then Garmin took over in a few years. So it's a bad. I mean, it's something a Finnish person actually told me, that they're great technology but bad at marketing wearable tech. But this company makes shorts, and they're also targeting cyclists and runners. But these shorts cost about $1,200. I don't know why their price point is so high. Ours is 300, and that's only because we're manufacturing 500 units. If we go down lower, then if we go higher in volume, the price will go down. So I don't know why these guys are selling it for 1,200, but they are also our competition. But I'm assuming they're targeting a very high-end niche of the market and not not the consumer, not the broader consumer space like us. So that's our competitive landscape.
Right at the back there, and then I'll circle back around.
Okay, you just mentioned your device will connect lots of data, right? And you are going to upload those data to cloud.
That's right.
So do you have any plan to commercialize those data?
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Okay, so your biggest profit will from the consumer or from some advertiser or some medical company?
Yeah, so I actually don't, I mean, I can speak to that. I don't structure that part of the business. I'm focusing on developing the physical product plus the app side. So I know we have in the works a big data play. I'm not sure what the monetization strategy for that is. I'm assuming that advertisers and companies, health and wellness programs, for example, TELUS contacted us, and insurance and all that stuff will be part of the monetization strategy and advertisers. But I'm not sure exactly how we're going there. But it's definitely part of the strategy.
So how long you think you are going to reach that stage, commercialize your big data?
Yeah. So the big problem with it is that we have scarce resources. So we have no resources right now to allocate to a data system that's not like a simple data system to just store data. So that's what we're doing right now. And we're focusing more on developing the hardware and developing the app. So the part of the product that shows immediate value to the consumer. And then we start branching out to big data and monetizing that part of the business. And I think that'll be more December and onwards. So we'll start really pushing that in December and onwards. But right now we're focusing until at least December on getting the fundamentals of the product. So I can't give you an exact date.
Suzanne?
How many of these units are you thinking you'll sell?
Okay. What our sales figures are? I don't know. So we sold. Okay. So let's look at it this way. We had an Indiegogo campaign and we sold 700 units in
A little over a month.
in a month and a half. Okay. So if we were to do that for a year, what would that be? My counting is bad. That would be
7,000 plus.
7,000 plus, right?
8,000.
So if we were to sell this for a year at the current marketing budget, which is 0, we would be selling 7,000 a year. If we were to do this properly, and which we are going to do in April, and actually do another launch with a new video and a new website, and a product that's complete and we can actually send out. And then we expand into traditional e-commerce platforms like Amazon and eBay, and then we would even hit retailers and mom and pop shops and get our distribution network lined up. Then I would assume 30,000 units a year, let's say, and that would be conservative, I think. So hopefully that gives you an idea.
And so you're looking at distributing this around the world?
Yeah, it's already international on Indiegogo, but as soon as we start hiring a sales force and the marketing team, there'll be the PR and the marketing side and the paid advertising and all that, and then there will be the sales force locking up distribution channels and selling it to mom and pop shops and stuff like that. So yeah, it would be all over the world.
Cool. Sanjay?
In not knowing the difference between the two platforms.
Matched by any other country in the world, right? Even more so in Quebec, actually. So that's one. Number two is Ottawa is like a talent island. Once you get on here, you can't get out. Because once you get here, at least what I've found, in California people move around all the time. You get poached from one place and then go to another and get poached again. In Ottawa, there is really, I think, in terms of the early startup world, there's only really 3 or 4 companies that are really attractive. And hopefully we'll come up, Shopify being one of them. There's a few others. Hopefully we'll add to that list. And because there's so few of these and it's such a small community, there is very little travel in this community. So it is a talent island. Once you get to people, you tend to retain them. And talent retainment is a very important piece for startups because you need continuity. Once you lose somebody, you don't have a big infrastructure to replace them. You don't have process to be able to replace them. And so in a startup, when there is no process and one person typically defines a big portion of your product, you want to keep them for a long time. And that's why California, and also the cost of hiring somebody here is much lower than that in any other city. So those are reasons why we would we stayed. If we could poach people from other areas and bring them to Ottawa, we know they'd stay.
And they're on the island.
We know they'd stay on the island.
There's no lifeboats. They're stuck.
Can you get voted off the island?
Yes, exactly.
You can get voted. You can get voted.
Is there another question on this side? This side here, yes. Go.
Do you have an employee share option program?
Yes, we have what's called an ESOP, and we give out. We're pretty generous, we've been told, with our employment stock option plan. So everybody now, at least at this point, once the next run closes, that's gonna dip significantly because there's less equity. And
So this is the recruitment portion.
this is, yeah. So if anybody's interested in equity and would like a lower salary and long hours, and please come to GestureLogic.
He's trying to get you to the island. Yeah, right up front.
So you mentioned your Indiegogo campaign. It was really the geeks who were buying.
That's right. The nerds with a fitness passion.
The nerds with a fitness passion. So
Yeah.
did it give you any insight?
It's true, right, Michael?
Of what the retail consumption would be? I mean, it wasn't really, is it really an indicator or no indicator of what's going to happen at the retail level?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of people argue that it's not an indicator at all.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say that, you haven't tapped all the early adopters on Indiegogo. There's plenty of others out there. I don't know. It's really hard to tell. It's hard to tell, but I know that we have reached out to retailers before, and they've been very happy to make shelf space.
Okay.
So I think from that perspective, I think we're still attractive to retailers as well, even though we haven't had any retailers buy on Indiegogo.
Right.
And we actually are trying to get retailers last minute to buy now, to sort of have that validation piece as well. But the answer is unknown. But now that we have $1 million, I just revealed the number, over $1 million of investment coming in the next round. There's a press release coming out with that soon, anyways, right?
Not quite yet.
Whatever.
I'll hold on to the video until we won't. It doesn't leave the room. It's an island, right? How far can it
It's
go?
an island.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, digital.
Damn it, smartphones.
But now that we have that money coming in, I think we'll have a lot more room to figure that out. So, yeah.
I think the previous gentleman's point about big data was very relevant. I mean, you might get to the point where you realize the business model says you should be giving away these units.
Yeah, to corporate health and wellness programs or whatever. Yeah, I agree. And I think the hardware right now it's a barrier to entry, but eventually it'll transition from science to just execution. And it'll get commoditized like every other product, and low margin and that kind of stuff. And you'll want to transition to the big data play. I agree, but the thing is, we still need somebody to pick up a phone, put this thing on, and say, "Oh wow, this is really helping me work out." You still need that piece. So that's the fundamental, and then you can expand to the big data play. At least in my mind, that's the way to go.
I'd agree. I saw a hand at the back there somewhere. Yes.
Why are you going the retail way? Why not direct sale?
Well, that's what we're doing now.
No, but I mean long term.
Yeah, in long term, we will go e-commerce. The next stage will be e-commerce, like eBay and Amazon, and then the problem is, the reason why this product is still potentially attractive for retail is because it's in between technology and clothing, and people want to put clothing on before they buy it. Tech is different. Like I'll buy a tablet from a store, but I won't buy a shirt from a store if I haven't put it on. So this is where retail, I think, makes sense. But maybe not like big box retail, maybe just mom and pop shops, cycling stores like Running Room or GestureLogic or whatever cycling shops you have around here. If you notice, cyclists have a tendency of now buying online, but a lot of them buy mom and pop shops. So we'll follow the trend of where our customers are buying things, I think.
But like Fitbits are in Best Buy, and
Fitbits are in Best
and
Buy,
with
yeah.
with Apple and Google pushing it, I think that you'll probably see their hardware inside little stores, or those vending machines that Apple has at airports and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, true.
And I think that it's a price point thing too, right? Like at $180 or $250 or whatever, like it's almost an impulse buy as you're walking down, the aisle, and you just want to have the latest and greatest. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's. Thank you, Franco.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question.
Oh, sorry. Did you have a follow
I
up?
just wanna
Sure.
follow
Yeah,
up,
sure.
Because I was at the Van Hawks last month,
Yeah.
2 months ago, and they're direct selling bicycles, which I would have thought was extremely difficult to do. I'm a cyclist and a runner as well. I've never bought a bike online. I don't think I ever would, and yet they're being very successful, deliberately trying to disrupt the market and
Yep.
doing their one-day virtual stores in different places around, say, a city or something like
Yeah.
that. So I just thought that
I'm
yours
not-
would be easier to sell that way.
Yeah, I'm not saying we're going to go into retail. I'm saying that that's an evolution of a product typically. We might find out that a year down the line, retailers are getting out of retail, and we don't even want to be in retail. So, but I know that you know, you're a cyclist and a runner. You probably buy most of your stuff at a mom and pop shop, right? Like you wouldn't buy a power meter. I don't know if you use a power meter or a heart rate monitor. You wouldn't buy those online. Maybe you would. I don't know.
A heart rate monitor I do use, power meter too expensive, so I don't.
Right, and the heart rate monitor you bought where?
Pushtoka?
Right. So that's sort of validation why selling through mom and pop shops might be a good idea. The problem is the cost of sales goes up because you have to have a sales force to maintain those distribution channels. Whereas in e-commerce, it's one guy who makes a deal with Amazon. But you know, that's not my side, not my side of the business. So I can't really speak to it. There are things I don't know about my own business.
All right, just here on the left.
You mentioned CEO and the product development. I think you say marketing. Who's handling your marketing?
Who's handling? So we don't have a dedicated marketing person. We have a person who does financing and the marketing. Financials and the marketing, sorry. The CEO does all the financing, and then Michael does the financials and the marketing. But we're shutting down, or we're backing off on the marketing a lot now, and spending more time on the product dev and making partnerships with suppliers and making the ecosystem to be able to create this product. So, yeah, there's a little bit of transition.
Which is you for marketing, because I'm looking for one.
Yeah, so marketing talent, especially B2C talent, again, it's one of those things in Ottawa that you probably won't find. You need to go to Toronto or Boston or New York or Cali where it's been done before for the consumer electronics space. So for us, it's very difficult, and we won't be doing that until we have a Series A and we can pay somebody 150, 200K for a seasoned consumer electronics exec who's done marketing before.
Yep, right behind. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you said competition does wearable tech like shorts and shorts, and you guys have a wearable band on the thigh. Has it been validated by test runners or cyclists? Does it slip, or how do you manage that?
Good question. First of all, it doesn't slip. You have silicone grip strips that similar to cycling shorts have it too, and it doesn't slip. The reason why we didn't go with shorts is because most cyclists for our target market already have their own brand of shorts, right? You don't want to reinvent that sort of thing, and there's fashion associated with it, and fashion is an unknown thing to me as an electrical engineer. You know, I know how. There's a few people in the audience nodding yes because they know that my fashion sense is. So what we found out is, well, runners and cyclists will just put their shorts over top of this band, and it will be just inconspicuous. You won't even notice it, and it won't be. And also, you don't want to wear something that's ultra compressive all over your body, because this thing has to be ultra compressive. It's more compressive than typical cycling shorts because it has to be, the sensors have to be in direct contact with your skin. It's not like unbearably compressive, but it's more compressive than a regular garment. So you don't want that all over your body, and I think the people that are trying to go that route are probably going to find that their average consumer is not willing to bear that sort of compression. So, my hypothesis.
You mentioned that you've gone through many different prototypes, and you mentioned earlier about Indiegogo actually allows you to put a prototype up there and not actually be what's going to be sold.
That's right.
How close are you to a final product, and what's the main differences from your prototypes to what you think the final product is going to be?
Okay. Okay, so we're, in certain parts of the product, we're further ahead, in certain parts we're behind. We're ahead on the hardware side, so we've pretty much, other than a little circuit for the hydration and a different processor, but that's not a huge change, and a little bit of a size shrinkage, our hardware is pretty much finalized. The textile portion, that's probably where we're furthest behind, because we're using a laminate structure. So we're taking a layer. Inside it, there's conductive fabric. So by the way, the band has no wires in it. It's all fabric. It's all conductive fabric. So there's a layer with conductive fabric, then there's another layer that isolates that, and then another layer at the bottom. So it's tri-laminate. And that's a very laborious process. You got to use different glues, you got to use different types of fabrics, and it's all manual. You got to cut them in the shapes and that kind of stuff. So that's difficult. So what we're doing is we're doing that in-house, but we're switching to a supplier that does a compression knitwear, it's called. And it just knits this tube with a knitting machine with like hundreds of threads and all at once. And it could knit in the kind of, it's almost like embroidery. It could knit in the conductive yarn that we want. And it's all done in one piece, and then we put the hardware on there and done. So that's what we want. So that takes a long time to develop. Only one company in the world that I know of has developed this technology, and that's Home Signal in Montreal, and we're sort of doing the same thing with a supplier in Florida. So that part is going to take about 9-10 months. Then there's the whole software side, the iOS, where right now our UI that is developed and designed by Michelle on a screen, and it's all graphic, needs to be translated to an app, and that's a laborious process, so that's going to take a few months. And then, all the product testing and all the last 20%, that fixing all the bugs and making it seamless and making the user experience very smooth, that's going to take a few months too. So I'd say we're about 10 months away from a final product. And then there's the manufacturing side where you have to do a pre-production run, another run, and then final run, and then there's a bunch of steps in the manufacturing process. So that'll be the last 3 months of the 10 months. I hope that answers the question.
Or just hang on, Blue. Yeah, you go ahead.
So, do you have any legal issues with using third-party technology and sensors?
So we're not. We're an OEM, right? So we combine original chips from people and put it into a system. So that doesn't involve legal problems because that's how phone manufacturers, for example, they take chips from various places, put them in, and create a system. That's what we did. So we didn't. There's no legal trouble there. There's some open source code that we've used, but we're going to develop our own anyway, so we won't have trouble there. And no legal issues there on that side. We're developing everything ourselves. We're just not developing the integrated circuits, the chips. So that's a $10 million endeavor on its own. So
absolutely, that could be the next thing you tackle.
Yeah, that's semiconductors. That's a whole different.
No last questions? Okay, sounds good. Well then, I'd like to have everyone give a big round of applause to